Our second panel is on insider threat. It's going to be led by Kristin Judge, who is the CEO and founder of the Cybercrime Support Network. Kristin and panelists, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Bradford, for the introduction. It's so wonderful to be here with all these experts to talk about insider threat today. What I'm going to do is have each of the panelists introduce themselves and let us know what they do, and then we'll get right into the questions. So I'm going to start off with Michael. If you could let us know who you are with and what you do, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. My name is Michael Krauss. I'm with Forcepoint. I run like director for insider threat, insider risk programs, and also consider myself a user protection specialist, as I've spent, I would hate to say, a few years in this environment. And like we all on this panel, we don't want to date ourselves. So I would just leave it as that, but I'm excited to be here and thank you very much.
Great, thank you. We're not asking any ages today. Mine either. Matthew, how about you?
Hey, just getting off mute. Matthew Gardiner. I'm a principal security strategist at Mimecast, and I'll just say I have something around 20 years of security experience in various roles, so glad to be here.
Thank you. Ron.
Hi, Ron Bennatan. I'm the CTO at jSonar. Been doing database and data lake security for 25 years. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris Pittman. I run sales engineering here at BlackBerry in the central United States. I teach digital and network forensics here at Eastern Michigan University. I have a background in both security operations and security vendor sales and consulting. So happy to be on the panel today.
Yay, EMU. All right, Steve.
I'm Steve Litras. I'm the lead evangelist for Cribl. We help you implement observability pipelines to route security machine data wherever it has the most value. And I've been, for many moons, I've been in the IT and IT space with bits of security thrown throughout my career.
And one of the coolest backgrounds in a Zoom call I've been on for a while. Great.
Sure.
And Nick. Nick, how about you?
Hi, Nick Yokum. I'm a senior systems engineer with Code 42, and we are providing a solution to insider threat detection and response. And thank you for having us today.
Great. Thank you. Cy?
Hi, I'm Chavali, a product.
You are not coming through very well for me.
Within the insider threat business unit. And
is everyone else having an issue with Cy's sound? Okay, Cy, I'm going to ask you to hold off for a second there and see if we can't get a different.
Okay. Why don't you come back to me?
Actually, you're coming in loud and clear now. Let's keep going. Thank you.
Or just continue.
All right, we will come back to Cy. I'm Kristin Judge with the Cybercrime
Go ahead,
Support.
I'll come back.
Thank you. And we are a nonprofit public-private partnership. We also have a booth along with the great companies that you see represented here. So please make sure after you listen in that you're going to go and take a look at our booths. We have resources. We help cybercrime victims to report, recover, and reinforce their security. So we appreciate having an opportunity to be a part of this discussion. I'm going to start with Nick for the first question. And I want to talk about how do you identify a potential malicious user before they become an insider threat, and then how do you defend against them?
It's a good question. So how do you identify it before they become the insider?
Yes, yes.
I think that comes down to monitoring, right? You want to have a solution in place that can do a look back on any type of user, and of course can detect red flags, right? Anomalies in data, maybe anomalies in when the user is working versus not working, and track trends, right? And try to figure out how those trends are then affecting behavior.
Great, thank you. And then how about you, Ron? What would you say to that question?
Yeah, I mean, the methods are fairly consistent, right? I mean, everybody uses similar methods of trying to build a machine learning model to kind of identify or baseline what a user is doing. And then if a user starts doing something very different, then you know, that's an anomaly or an outlier. But you know, the trick is that, you know, on paper, it's all the same. The question is how reliable that model could be and how much noise you can get out of the model, because models are, you know, it's enough that you have 2% or 5% things that are flagged when they shouldn't be flagged, and people will very quickly start ignoring the model. in my space, which is the kind of data access space, it's a little easier because access to databases or data lakes are fairly consistent. They're periodic. They do follow a very cyclical approach, so the models are more reliable. But there are some techniques which, you know, any model can use. Okay, so the longer time you use for the model, for building the model, you get better consistency. The more data you have, you get better consistency. The more context you have, the better the models are. Like, for example, if you have access to data through an application, if you can bring the context of what the application user was and not just what the data repository user was, then the models become much better. And so one important thing is to find ways to make the models better. And once you have a model, it's not just about using those outliers, but also you know, the models themselves. You asked about you know, how do you identify before something or the minute something happens. So for example, you know, there's always this question of service accounts and fire IDs and scripts. And the most classic way, or one of the classic ways that insider threats or insiders kind of get at the data is they hijack an account that they know is trusted, that they know is a service account. But if you have good models and you can know what a service account usually looks like, it's fairly easy to see when a human hijacks something like this. So
thank you. Yeah, it comes back to the data and having that information, right? That's
Yeah.
good. Cy, let's see if we can't get you introduced here before we finish out this question with some other gentlemen.
Sure. I'm Cy, product marketing within Proofpoint's ITM business unit. I think things that Nick and Ron said were very accurate. I think I'd broaden the perspective to when we think about insider threat management, we're not just talking about the technology, because the technology fits in with the processes that folks have. And so when we're thinking about how do you set up, how do you find people who are doing things you know, kind of risky as they're doing it or before, it's making sure that your team is set up with the processes to know these things. If just having random, you know, kind of detection tools just leads to data, you know, data overload and alert overload. So I start first with the processes, and then things that Nick and Ron said on the detection and technology side are very, very accurate.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Michael to chime in on this question, and then we'll round it out with Matthew.
Sure. Well, Kristin, one of the things that I noticed is that we keep on talking about specific events and specific alerts and specific incidents. What I would contend is that we kind of bring that up a level. We got to, if you want to get left of whatever you want to call it, a lot of people call it boom, a lot of people call it breach, left of the action, right? The data exfiltration. That's what this is all about, right? Protecting data that's leaving your organization. That's the business outcome. So if we want to get left of that, I would say we got to start talking about kind of a user-centric model versus an event-centric model, because I guarantee you, everybody on this call has spent time in front of a console that has incidents and events, and just looking at those going, what am I looking at? Mike Krauss had 10 incidents. Are those actually correlated together like Ron was saying? Is this information actually useful? Can I take these incidents and wrap it into another observable or technical information? And I need to continue to do that, continue to evaluate it. So I think one of the biggest things we have to understand from a group is that, look, let's get out of this incidents. Let's get out of this event mode. Let's just talk about who are our riskiest users. And then from there, let's try to get left of actually a data exfiltration breach.
Great. And Matthew, want to join in?
Yeah, I think this consistent with this is like monitoring drives indicators. Indicators are in models. Models drive alerts. Obviously, you don't want to over alert people for sure. But with that enables investigations, and so you know, no model is going to be perfect. You want the tools and data in the hands of the investigator, and kind of the beauty of doing it that way is that it's not just the malicious insider; it's the careless, accidental, it's the compromised. You know, an actual cyber criminal. You're going to sort of find all of those using kind of the same techniques and tools.
Great, thank you. And we're going to take the next question to Steve here. So Steve, we were talking about how you think about things and find the threats beforehand, but once something has occurred and there's been a malicious threat, insider threat, what do you do to mitigate the damage?
Well, I think the key component to that is how much data you have available and what you can do with it. I think there are things you do beforehand around maintaining hygiene of your environment to ensure that you know, the picture that Michael painted about all the different incidents and what do they mean is minimized. But once you get there, once you actually have the problem, you need to make investigations easy to do. You need to make it easy to get through whatever data you do have. And I think, to me, one of the real key components is data management in all of these kind of issues right now. You know, we have a lot of log data coming in. That's gigs, terabytes a day, depending on the size of your company. You need to retain that data as long as you can, and you know, that's hard to do in a lot of the systems we have. So, you know, going back to hygiene, figuring out new ways of managing the data you have and new ways of keeping more around, I think are kind of critical to being able to do that.
Great, thank you. And then, Cy, did you want to join in on this discussion too?
Yeah, sure. And actually, I want to pick up on what Michael said around user focus. That's so crucial, because I think when we think about insider threat management, it's you know, it's about data, but it's also about the systems. It's about the applications. It's what the person is doing, and many times just before something is exfiltrated and such, there's a lot of actions that they've done on their systems that are that may be risky, that may be malicious, that may be negligent, and so all of these things definitely do come into a user-centric model of the world.
That's a great point. Now we're going to talk about, and I want to take this one over to Nick. Nick, would you tell us what your thoughts are on how do you identify areas where unintentional insider threat may occur, and how do you prevent that human error from causing a breach? We know there's most of the insider threat probably is going to come from people just making a mistake. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, that's always a tough one, right? First, you need visibility to be able to tell that they are making a mistake, and a lot of times we find that, you know, with the move to the cloud, right? Data has become so portable lately that it's you know, so movable. You have to be able to track it from the endpoint to the cloud, back again to external drives through browser activity, and really have visibility on how that data moves within your environment. But the answer to how you prevent it is you have to train, right? So once you have the visibility, then you can train the users to maybe not share that link with a public link and just share it with who they're looking to share it with. But maybe even more than that, use that information on where the data is moving and say, well, hey, I've got this group of users that's using Dropbox. That's not an approved application. So then it becomes my job to say, okay, well, is there a business need for that my OneDrive or my Google Drive or whatever else isn't providing today? So how do I fill that gap, right? Do I support that technology, or do I write a policy around not using that technology? So you have to have a close relationship, I think, with legal as part of that.
Yeah, we're going through that, looking at what apps and cloud services our team uses right now. And it's funny, there's always some cloud service that someone signs up for but doesn't quite tell you about. So got to keep an eye on that. Chris, would you join in on talking about the unintentional insider threat?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, and I would definitely agree that training and education, and certainly visibility, also modeling, right, is one. So if we can prevent and predict, know what typical behaviors are, so that we can recognize what atypical behaviors are, that's certainly true. I think there's also a concept in the field that we refer to as, you know, zero standing privilege. So if we go back to just some of the basic hygiene around what users are allowed to do based on their rights, and also how file rights and permissions are granted, making sure that we have a handle on those, and then taking that a step back into the world that we call zero trust, right? A big concept in the world of zero trust is that we just don't by nature allow any particular user or application or share to have, or session, to have rights to do everything that they want to do. So we introduce this idea of transactional security, where at the point of transaction, I'm going to look at who the user is, what device they're on, what data they're trying to use, what application is in play, and where they're trying to move it. And at machine speed, I'm going to decide, is this a good idea or not? Is it typical for this user to do that or not? Is it okay for this classification of data to be moved or transacted in this way or not? And of course, we have to utilize some level of machine learning for that, because it's the only thing capable of handling all of that, all of those variables in real time. But I think that's really where we're moving, right? To be able to handle those decisions in a real-time fashion, because what we've seen in a world of data loss prevention and rights management and everything else is that those never really get fully implemented or fully maintained. So there's always the realm for the mistake. So I think we have to get to a place of transactional security. I think that's my view on it.
Thank you. Ron, how about you?
I think all the things that are correct. I would add one thing. I think a lot of this is about discipline and about some kind of like a management focus. You know, clearly in all our spaces, most of the issues are caused by error. They're not, you know, we don't have 10 breaches per day. We have a lot of insider issues and errors and problems. The problem is that errors often mask what's really happening, and it just prevents us from picking up on real things, and we call these hygiene issues. So there's a big difference between a threat and a hygiene issue. The problem is that threats get a lot of attention, and fixing hygiene issues don't get a lot of attentions, and it just it kills the models. The model, if there's a lot of errors and a lot of failed logins and a lot of scripts that are never being fixed, when you do have something, you're just not going to see it. And we did a study on it. If you just fix 20% of hygiene issues, you improve the threat detection program by 2x. So like 100% versus 20. It's just worth dealing with these things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's harder to make the point to the people that have the paycheck or the funding to be able to make sure that you can do that. But it's really so critical. Michael, did you want to join in?
A couple things. Well, I think Chris brought it up, transactional security. I like that, by the way, Chris. That's a great terminology. But also I want to kind of glob onto that is that when I hear about transactional security, I think about closing the loop. So we have a lot of technology that surfaces risk and says, hey, you have a problem, right? Or, hey, this potential user is exhibiting behavior that is consistent with potentially, you know, somebody leaving the organization that could lead to data exfiltration, XYZ, malicious behavior, compromised user. Hey, that's great, but what are you doing about it? In the past, we just take this bit of information and nothing happens. So I would contend that we need to almost like close the loop and optimize our control points, whether a control point being a DLP, whether a control point being an access manager, whether a control point being something that's non-technical, that we use our visibility and use our insight to either automate that, so you're kind of reducing what they call mean time to respond. So you're reducing that from days to hours to real time, which will allow you to kind of mitigate those risks. False positives, yes, you're going to get those, but hopefully over time you'll be able to kind of build more robust platform. And one other thing I want to make a point is that insider threat, to really show that for the unintentional, you got to make it personal. How does my unawareness, how is my mistakes I make going to impact me? Bring it back to them into whatever fashion you want, whether it's going to impact your stock, whether it's going to impact your salary, whether it's impact to work with great people because we can't hire people. I think you need to make it personal as well from a non-technical point. Okay.
Good point. Matthew.
Yeah, just to maybe put a finer point on it, the beauty of careless actions is that they're not purposeful, and so you can think primarily about them doing it by accident in their normal course of business. And what do people, when it relates to data leakage, how would you leak data? You're going to leak it via email. So obviously you can lock down that channel, inspect it, and prevent and monitor. You're probably going to do it via the web. So you're going to share the wrong content, and or you're going to share content to unapproved apps. So you can lock down that channel too. And then the third is just picking up what Mike said, is that, the training aspect, like, they're careless because they don't know that it's not the right thing to do. And so you need to not just explain to them and technically why it's not the right thing to do, but help them understand the impact of the business and the impact of them personally by doing the wrong thing. And if you do those three things, email, web, and good solid training, consistent training, I think you'll take care of 80% of your careless actions.
Thank you. Cy, would you finish this conversation up for us and we'll go on to the next question?
Sure, I'll touch upon two things. One Michael said around closing the loop, and it goes back to that people-centric worldview when we're thinking about insiders, because they could be doing many different things. Some people could be having actions across multiple systems, and being able to really pull that together to a person is very useful, especially for a security team to then understand, okay, what kind of controls do we need to put in place. And the second one is on the security awareness side. It's so useful. One of the things when we say bring it down to the person, sometimes it's also just about when it's negligent, be able to tell them in real time, being able to give that security awareness. And that's where I think security awareness is also, you're seeing changes there. It's not just that one-time annual security awareness that we're doing anymore. It's changed. It's changed based on what the person was doing and when we're giving that awareness or the training and education.
Yeah, it has to be part of the culture. Security is a culture. We hear that so much now. I'm going to send this question over to Chris. How are insider threat behaviors changing now during our new work from home pandemic? And then is that impacting security decisions about insider threat?
Yeah, well, for sure. I think we'll all probably have something to say about this. I think number one, right, everyone started working remotely, so our threat landscape or our target increased dramatically. As users began using mobile devices, home devices to access work data, work applications, everything suddenly became much more vulnerable. We have an idea as users, even IT and security users, that our mobile devices, like my phone, is more secure simply because I carry it. I know what it is. I know what's on it. The reality is, right, we've seen a number of white paper studies now just over the last 6 months that there are significant security threats in backdoor applications, in file system level attacks, and not even to get into things like Bluetooth and remote access attacks on mobile devices that are a significant problem. So, I mean, that's one of the things that we're dealing with at an at-home level. And I remember going back to like March or April of this year when COVID was just sort of happening across the nation. And RSA, the organization, talked about really there being 3 waves of security where COVID was concerned. And the first is going to be the wave of enablement, where companies have to just get product and access and equipment out to their employees. That's the first objective, right? The second objective then would be to assess, right? What are we looking at now in terms of a new threat landscape? I think that's largely where we are. As organizations, we're looking at the fact we have our home users, we have them online and enabled, but what are those new threats? And I think we're moving into the third one, which is going to be governance, right? What is the new security governance that we need to do to keep these devices and these applications safe?
Right.
And I think this is where a lot of different technologies are going to come into play. It's not going to be a simple, I need a VPN. It's not going to be simple, I need some kind of a secure remote access. But I think, once again, going back to the beginning of this conversation, we need to put people at the center of that conversation and understand how can we secure the person regardless of what they're doing.
Great, thank you. Nick, would you please join in on this really important question?
Sure. Yeah, I think, the digital transformation trends have been going on for some time now. And I think that some people were kind of putting that off and holding out on that. And I think now that has continued to ramp up and go faster and faster. And I think that a lot of companies out there are taking more of that load off of VPNs, right? So they're not getting the visibility that they had within, the 4 walls of the firewall. And so having visibility in this new age is key. And just like Chris said, you have to have governance, but in order to provide governance, you got to figure out what's going on first, right? What are users doing? I mean, 2 easy examples of that is there's not really any reason that you should be printing unless you're running shipping labels out of your house, right? And I have had a customer that was doing that. We got on Zoom and they had a warehouse of boxes behind them. So unless you're doing something like that, right, you really don't have a business need to print anymore. So
what about the kids' homework? What about that? Come on now,
that's
it's
true.
COVID.
That's true.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, kids' homework is important too, right?
Yeah. Hopefully
Yeah,
that's
I
all
think
digital.
yeah, that's all digital now, right? So it's all uploading, right? Fill it out and upload it. There's no handing it in, getting your A and your circle on
Nope.
it.
No more red pens. Steve,
That's
do you
right.
want to join in on this one?
Yeah, I think it was Michael who said something to the effect of, part of the whole education piece is really connecting people with it personally, so they kind of understand why they're responsible for these things. And I think the home networking thing, everybody's now a network administrator, and darn near nobody is really used to that, right? They don't necessarily know that, hey, if I have a really light Wi-Fi password, other people are going to get on my network, and what does that mean to me? So I think part of it is really getting people to understand what their responsibilities are and help them understand how to deal with those responsibilities. And moreover, why they need to. I think the why is such an important piece of almost all security education that I think often gets missed. That I think it's a really critical thing to highlight.
And Cy, would you finish out by sharing your thoughts on the work from home issue with insider threat?
Yeah, I'll use some data that we constantly collect, kind of the threats that are happening within our customers' environments. And what we have seen is, we all think about the cloud as, that's been a new threat because it's been growing. It's been a bit of a change. Previously, we used to see kind of just the cloud, normal, very common cloud services being used, and that was something that companies were worried about. Now we're seeing, because endpoints are being used for multiple purposes, we're seeing a massive rise of that shadow IT of applications that security teams just wouldn't have seen before. Kids applications. And that's been an area that we have seen, customers have been worried about data exfiltration. The other one is, it's just a sad truth that people use their endpoints for many personal purposes and many out of policy activities that you really would have assumed that any, kind of person would know, not if they want to engage in those, and don't do it, especially on your corporate endpoint. But we've seen a rise of that as well within customer environments. That goes beyond data, but it's definitely people-centric.
Yeah, and I think if people are home, they have their guard down a little bit. You're not sitting at your work desk. They might start doing a little surfing that they're used to doing at home without even thinking about it. I know I'm sitting in, my room. It's very different than sitting in an office. So Matthew, we're talking so much about, the employees and safe online behavior. Is there something that can be done to raise the bar on the level of knowledge for our employees?
Well, I mean, I think hopefully you were digitally transformed your user awareness training, security awareness training already. If you haven't, now it's an emergency, because the meetings aren't going to happen. The water cooler conversations aren't going to happen. So, if you haven't rolled out a security awareness training platform and program, you should have. But better late than never. Do it now, because ultimately whether people are in the office or working from home, it's still useful. It's still the way to do it. And perhaps now you have management's attention on a number of security transformations that you can make, and user awareness and understanding is key. And you're not going to be able to reach them unless you have sort of an automated platform, because they're working from home and they're on Zoom doing other things.
Yeah, can you take that a step further? Security awareness training, prevention controls, and then business processes. I'd like everybody wants to chime in on this one. So
the old
how
people,
would you
process,
weight
and
those?
technology.
Yeah, how would you weight those?
Well, that's a good question. I'll say a third, because then that adds up to one. So most organizations, they've spent most of their time on preventive controls, and so you need to make sure that they're location independent, which usually means cloud these days. But it's important that a lot of the short-sightedness or the lack of investment traditionally is in the process and people side. And so now your processes are extended to people's homes. So to the extent any safety was the fact that people were together, that's gone. So make sure your processes are location independent. And then of course the people is making sure they understand the threats and the attacks they may see, and the behaviors you want and the behaviors you don't want. And that usually just falls under the security awareness training. Like, do it regularly, make sure it's remotable, make sure it's automated, make sure it's appropriate for the YouTube generation.
That's right. Yeah, the quick hits. Thank you. And so Nick, what are you about prevention controls, security awareness, and business processes? How would you rate those?
So I think if you're classifying the person, right? If you're looking at the person versus the data, and you're taking a look at that person and their behaviors and what they're doing and how they're moving data, right? Then you have to have a control based on that, right? Some sort of a solution that's really tracking what that user is doing at the user level, right? Not at the data level. And then you have to really wrap that with process. So you have to have a really close-knit relationship from security to HR, and then of course to legal as well. So I think those three departments really have to work in tandem to be able to solve that problem from the process standpoint.
Great point. Yeah. Ron, could you talk to us a little bit about the trending that is related to security affecting human errors? Is it increasing or decreasing over the last year? What are you seeing?
So, it's almost counterintuitive, but what we saw was a big increase first, but now it's starting to decline. So it's almost like a COVID case graph. It spikes and then it goes down. And what I think is happening is that a lot of things are moving into the cloud, and it's moving a little faster than originally planned. And there's a lot of skills missing still. Kind of the data workloads, the ones that I see, they move into the cloud. The people who know the cloud well are not the people who know the applications well or the repositories well. So the knowledge is like split, and it's harder to come together. So initially it just goes up because they just don't know exactly what to do. There's not enough people. Sometimes the security tooling is lagging behind the tooling that might bring those best practices. But then over time, what happens is just because of the standardization on the cloud, the environments are inherently safer, they're inherently better. So as long as that knowledge catches up, then things get better. But initially there is a spike in kind of human errors being more pronounced.
That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Michael, did you want to join in?
Yeah, it's interesting. Jump in on the back of Ron here. We've been talking to a lot of CISOs, and when you talk to a CISO in the past, or just any kind of leader, they had a 2-year window to do this digital transformation, right? You kind of went into them, and before COVID, they were like, yeah, I'm thinking about it. I got 2 years, and here's our plan, and we're rolling it out. And then when COVID hit, and they're like, the CEO pretty much came down and said, okay, everybody's working from home. They were like, the CISO was like, all right, I have 2 weeks or 2 months.
Days.
I had everybody at home now. Oh my God, my hair's on fire. What I have left of my hair, it is on fire. So what we've seen is that, to Ron's point, is that now you have people that aren't prepared to move to kind of the next phase of their digital transformation. They are coming at it like, I need help. How do I protect, I think Matthew and Chris said, how do I protect people not only on the endpoint when they're off network, but how do I protect now my data and system when it's going to cloud apps, when I'm using Salesforce, when I'm using OneBox, when I'm using Office 365, whatever's in a cloud? How do I do that? How do I get visibility on the endpoint? I got that. That's user activity monitoring. I can do that. But I have no idea how to get it off the cloud. And oh, by the way, am I going to look at 6 different interfaces? So their hair's on fire. So what we've told them is take a breath, pause, look at what makes sense for your organization in the short term. What's your risk? What's your high risk data, high risk systems? Plan for that, plan for the midterm, and plan for the far term. You can do it all. There is converged platforms out there that allow you to get that visibility across all those different endpoints. You can use your user risk scores to feed those different control points. But take a breath. 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 hours seems fast, but please educate our customers. So that's what we try to do.
If we all just slow down, if we get all the humans to just slow down a little bit and think about things. Steve, let's talk about when people don't slow down and a breach actually happens. What are some tips for making the cleanup a little bit less time consuming or painful?
Well, I always come back to all that hygiene. And I think we've been talking a lot about tools. I think the people side is extremely important. I think education, I think having executives that basically show that security is important to them helps with kind of that effort of getting people to buy in to whatever your security plans are. But making that, making the actual investigation or the cleanup easier really comes down to how clean is your environment to start with? How well set up are you to kind of deal with one of these issues? Do you have the data you need to do the investigation to figure out what happened and to go and plug the holes? I always come back to data on this stuff. I'm a broken record on that front. And I think it's really important to retain as much data as you can. But I think you also have to separate it. This is where I talk about data management. You have to separate your retention from your live analysis. Because if you're retaining 6-7 years worth of data in your log tool, you're going to have a lot of problems. It's going to be very expensive. You're going to be throwing infrastructure to solve a problem. But I think all those things really play into that, into making that cleanup easier.
Great, thank you. Next, I want to go to Chris Pittman. How is the insider threat problem magnified with the increase in mobile device vulnerabilities and exploits?
Well, we've hit some of this, but let's just talk about applications, right? Whether we're talking about Office, the Office productivity apps that users are using on their mobile devices to open email or attach documents or whatever the case may be, they're doing this on the same device that they also play games on the same device that their family may be using for other reasons or other applications. So it's critical to understand that there's no artificial barrier on that mobile device between whatever you're doing, from a work safe data standpoint and what you're doing for fun, unless you've made arrangements for that, right? Unless you have some kind of a containerization security application deployed, and not a lot of folks are doing that anymore, right? Because if they're not doing corporate issued devices, a lot of people are not interested in having a company managed container on their home device for all kinds of different reasons. So I think at that point, we have to start looking at probably two things, but one is just that application security. So how can I provide for my employees secure applications for them to use for work cases outside of a container, right? And maybe that's a matter of my organization has our own secure app store where my users can go and download the versions of apps that we use to perform work-related functions. And I don't care what you do with the rest of your device because I'm relying on that application to be secure and securely handle the data that you're using for work purposes. That's one way we can kind of cross that bridge between completely owning or managing a device and still allowing the user to maintain their autonomy and still be productive, because they're going to need to do both.
Yeah, well, we've seen on fraudsupport.org, we look at the analytics as to how people come and visit our website. And before COVID, it was about 85% came on a mobile phone, not a pad, but a mobile phone. Mm-hmm. But now with COVID, we're seeing more desktop because people are actually sitting at their desktop at home. Sure. But it's probably a work desktop. So that it was really interesting to us that we're seeing that shift there. Matthew, you wanted to add a little bit onto this question?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about small devices and think about the mobile browser, how impossible it is to tell what's going on, like the URLs off the screen. But it basically brings back to me, it's like email on the web or the way that they're going to carelessly leak. It doesn't matter really what the device is. So you should really apply the same controls, the same monitoring that you do, in the normal email and web world that you do to your mobile device.
Thank you. Nick, I'm going to take this one to you. If some company right now is listening and they don't have an insider threat program yet, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think it starts with executive buy-in. And then it starts with a clear policy after that, right? You have to have HR and legal on board. And I think I've said this a couple of times, but I've had a couple of clients where if they aren't on board and security says, well, look, I want to control this device or I want to control this access, but if they don't have buy-in from, first of all, an executive sponsor, and then also a clear acceptable use policy in place, then it makes it really challenging to actually develop an insider threat program. So I think those are the things that come first almost from the process side. And then of course you need a tool to have visibility to then have to then be able to dictate, hey, this is something that shouldn't be happening in my organization, right? I don't want source code going on a USB drive or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Steve, I know you're always talking about the data because that's really what is important here. How long should a company hold on to their data so that if they do have to react to an insider threat, they have what they need?
I like to make the joke how much money you got, because really the more data you can retain, the better in this case. There was a study done by Ponemon back in 2018 that said the average time from a breach occurring to detection is 197 days. So, you got to have at least a year, right? I mean, that's a little more than a half a year. You really have to have at least a year. But we all have heard about breaches that, took far longer. Marriott was, I believe, 4 years. There was one Dominion, I can't remember the entire company, but about 9 years. So, even having 2-3 years of data isn't going to really help with that investigation that much. Going back to the idea of data management and separating out your retention from your analysis systems, that's a critical component that, if I can put all of my log data or all my, traces and whatnot in super cheap storage, and I'm talking about like object storage, like Amazon S3 or Azure Blob, it opens up a whole world of how much I can store for the budget I have. So really, I guess the short answer is as much as you can.
Yeah. And Cy, would you have any thoughts for companies that want to put an insider threat program together? What your thoughts would be for them?
Yeah, I think Nick started really well on the process side. Well, one just tidbit on the leadership. When we are kind of advising clients, is both have the executive buy-in, but also have a working council or some operational level relationship between HR, legal, and cybersecurity, because often the alerts may come from a multitude of sources. Sometimes it might be a tip-off. Sometimes it might be something that HR has seen because of an employee putting in their 2-week notice or having had significant issues. And the second part, once you kind of get to the technology, is something we've hopped on quite often, but is for the security team to be able to construct or have tools that can construct a people-centric view. If you're doing it just on your own, you have to kind of do the work to correlate across multiple tools or multiple log sources, wherever you're getting visibility. But that's a critical part of the technology side that you will have to solve for.
Good point. Michael, could you check in on this question? So what security shift do you see for insider threat or user protection with respect to either technology or improved processes or procedures?
So a couple things. As we talked about it before a little bit, about being able to
map whatever requirements you have to a business outcome. If you've noticed recently with companies struggling from a cost perspective, insider threat programs are on the chopping block like any other program. So if you can't, as an insider threat, an insider risk, a user protection specialist, actually show value out of your program, show return on investment to the board, to the leadership, to your CISO, to the C-suite executives, you're in trouble. So the best way to do it is, it's not about, yes, we need the visibility, but we also need to show what's my goal at the end of the day from a business point of view. What is my ROI? What's my business case that's going to help me stand up in front of the board and say, you know what, I saved you X dollars because I was able to get in front of this and I was able to block this action from happening, which was a data breach, which was costing you blah, 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 based upon a Pittman study, based upon IBM reports. If we can't do that, you're going to be the organization when it comes down to and goes, I don't see no value in insider threat program. I believe in insider threat programs. I believe in it, but you need to map your technology, like Cy was saying, needs to be user-centric. You need to map it to a business outcome. And if you can do that in a converged platform in some way that is able to, from a technology point of view, process procedures, you're going to be so much better off. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, because we're all techies at heart. But techies at heart need to think with business, because business pays the bills.
That's right. Yeah, good point. I've heard that from a few people. Now what we're going to do in our last 5 minutes is take a minute to have each person give their last piece of sage advice to someone who's dealing with insider threats or putting together a program or looking to improve their program based on COVID now. So we'll just go around and have everybody sign off with something that they'd like to share. And we'll start with Steve.
Thanks. I come back to the basics. We've talked about a lot of tools. We have a lot of great tools represented here. But I still think it comes back to practice and people, almost above everything else. Focus on those, especially with the home COVID stuff. Like I said, everybody's a network engineer, and now they have to be able to deal with it. So that would be my final parting words.
Great, thank you. Ron, how about you?
It's funny. This is about insider threats, and I don't trust people. I think people are always going to make mistakes, and there's nothing we can do about that. And therefore, to me, and I understand that we need to show business outcomes, but it's really hard. It's really hard to quantify things. To me, the less we depend on people not making mistakes, the better. And to me, that's all about moving as quickly as possible into as much standardization as we can. So the faster we move stuff into the cloud, it takes control away from us. We're used to configure everything the way we want, and we shouldn't. We should have somebody else make as many decisions for us as possible. And to me, that means put it all in the cloud. We choose one of three things and we're done. We can make less mistakes and we can take ourselves out of the loop.
decrease that chance for human error.
Exactly, exactly.
Because we aren't going to fix the humans, unfortunately.
We're not going to fix the humans, no.
I wanted to make a t-shirt, cybersecurity, fix the humans, but I never did. Chris, how about you? Thanks, Ron.
Yeah, so I mean, security awareness and training and education and engagement and involvement across the enterprise, right? That's the name of the game. It can't be something that's driven or owned by IT security or IT. It has to be everybody. We've already said that. Here's the best way we've seen to do that, both academically and practically in organizations that have tried it, this concept called gamification. So in order to engage all of your employees in the security practice, you make games out of it. You give them avatars, you write a scoring system, there's rewards, there's different levels they can achieve based on their level of adherence and their level of compliance. Every organization implements one of those gamification systems, and you can Google it. There's plenty of them out there that are either predefined or ones or guides that can help you define your own for your organization. It drives engagement at the employee level to security programs like nothing else on the planet. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, what do humans like? We like to play games and get a prize, right? Yeah. Michael, how about you?
Well, first thing I'll say is that insider threat is not easy. Ron, you're 100% correct. I think if it was easy, we would all kind of be retired by now and in our lounge chairs. But one thing I will say is that as we look at COVID, we need to balance what I call security versus convenience, security versus mission. Whether it's giving a privileged user additional access because of COVID, they need to always have admin privileges on their workstation. They need to have every access to every database system because they're no longer in the office and no longer easy to control. So being able to provide that balance of security versus mission versus convenience is critical. And I'm going to leave you with one thought. And this was a quote that I received the other day from somebody off of a sports, but I put it into cybersecurity. We said basically, if I can quote the individual, you miss 100% of what you don't know in security. So just kind of keep that in mind. But thank you very much.
100% of the shots you don't take, right? That's really, I like that, how you've turned that around. Matthew, how about you?
Basically two takeaways for me. One is because of the credential stealing explosion and the increase in compromised users, you kind of get a twofer where you can try to prevent, detect, and respond to compromise, but you're also going to catch malicious as part of that. So you can sort of position the program for compromise, but get some coverage for malicious insiders. And then second, while I don't trust users per se, I have seen dramatic improvements where you take on security awareness training. Yes, it's never going to be zero, so you always have to have the other compensating controls, but you can make a lot of progress. Most people are not going to purposely do the wrong thing. They just don't know or don't take the time. So don't give up on security awareness training. It does move the needle.
Yeah, we can't give up on the people, but if we can automate much of it so they don't have a chance to make a mistake, that would be great. But we can't forget taking care of the human education part. Nick, how about you?
So for me, it's two things. I think the first is collaboration, right? You don't want to impact that negatively when you implement a program. You got companies going through digital transformations and they're looking to secure the tech, right? They're looking to secure their IP. So when you do that, just make sure that you don't inhibit that collaboration, because if you do, you're going to slow your company down. And during something like COVID, you're going to get left in the dust if you do that. And then the second part is Big Brother. If you come off as Big Brother, if employees get that feeling, you're going to lose good talent. So just those are the two takeaways, right? Don't impact collaboration and don't come off as Big Brother.
Really important information. Thank you. Cy?
Yeah, I'll finish off with, I actually really do believe in people in this case, because we have some very, very good talent working on it. And we are seeing quite a bit of success where companies are taking this seriously. So this is a very much solvable problem. And I think the way one of the starting points is really to do that hard work of figuring out which part of the problem is real in your environment. We say insider threats are everywhere, but it's different in different companies. And to figure those things out is many of the things that you can do, assessments, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that helps to start off, because once you have some initial success, we see a lot more translation into that being actual programs and then moving forward. So that's a few things for success.
Thank you so much. What a great conversation. So much more to talk about insider threat. And so I encourage all of the audience to go to the booths. These gentlemen and their counterparts will be there. And we also have a booth for the Cybercrime Support Network. So please come and visit us and keep the conversation going. And thank you so much to our panel.